everyone, and welcome to the 2021 virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival. I'm Sarah Jones. I'm a local musician in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area, and your host for this presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to support today's authors by purchasing their books from our wonderful bookseller partner, Politics and Prose, one of America's premier independent booksellers. You'll find purchase links in the presentation description. Given all that we've been through over the past year, it's more important than ever to support local jobs and each other. I also want to extend a big thank you to our 2021 featured sponsor, the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation, for their generous support. Okay, well, let's get started. Today, we have with us mystery authors Ed Aymar and Sean Cosby to discuss their latest action-packed thrillers, featuring a pair of murders and a desperate search for answers, and a former criminal drawn back to the driver's seat for one last heist. They're Gone, a dark and gritty thriller by Ed Aymar, is the intense story of two women on a desperate search for answers when their husbands, from vastly different backgrounds, are murdered one after the other on the same night, in the same fashion. This must-read whodunit blends a riveting story of corruption with emotionally complex characters and sharp black humor. Ed Aymar is an Anthony Award-nominated author whose past thrillers include the celebrated novel The Unrepentant. He has a monthly column in the Washington Independent Review of Books, is a former member of the National Board of the International Thriller Writers, and is an active member of Crime Writers of Color, the Mystery Writers of America, and Sisters in Crime. He also runs the Noir at the Bar series for Washington, D.C., and has hosted and spoken at a variety of crime fiction, writing, and publishing events nationwide. From Sean Cosby comes Blacktop Wasteland, a searing operatic story of a man pushed to his limits by poverty, race, and his own former life of crime. Formerly known as the best getaway driver east of the Mississippi, the novel's protagonist is haunted by the ghost of who he used to be and the father who disappeared when he needed him most. He must find a way to reconcile his beckoning past with his carefully constructed present, or die trying. In addition to Blacktop Wasteland, Sean Cosby is the author of Razorblade Tears, My Darkest Prayer, Brotherhood of the Blade, and numerous short fiction pieces, one of which won the Anthony Award for Best Short Story in 2019. Blacktop Wasteland was included on multiple Best of 2020 lists and is currently being adapted for Picture Start and John Legend's Get Lifted. And Razorblade Tears, out this July, has already been picked up by Paramount Pictures. Wow. Welcome, Ed and Sean.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Before we start, Sean, we just got to say, I mean, that was like, she has the most pleasant voice ever.
Oh yeah, it's she should be doing the program because I sound very, very confused most times, and she sounds incredibly articulate. I love it.
Yeah, and everybody's always like, you got to fix your sound because your voice sounds tinny, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Not the sound. I need her voice.
Yeah, it's the genetics, not the electronics. But
Hey, man, I am so I want to start this off by saying that this is really cool for me because I've known Sean, we've known each other for years now, probably 4-5 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And Blacktop Wasteland was so good. I mean, I think to a lot of people, it came out of nowhere. To your friends, this wasn't that big a surprise. We'd been watching you read at Noir at the Bars up and down the East Coast for years. We knew sort of that you always were the standout at those events, much to other writers' chagrin, including me, who hosted the freaking events and didn't get picked for best story of the night because you always took it. And seeing, you know, one of the things there's a lot of stuff we're going to touch on. One of the things we're going to touch on in the conversation is the crime fiction community and how supportive it is. And Sean's always been a key figure in that. Whenever people talk about supportive writers or people who are helping others out, or quick to jump to the defense of some kind of social issue rearing its ugly head in crime fiction, you're there. So your friends and readers all across the nation are so excited for you. So congrats on everything Blacktop Wasteland's done.
Well, man, thank you so much. And, just to echo what you said, there's not very many people who are stronger linchpins or foundations of the crime writing community than Ed Aymar, not just with the events that you host in DC, the vaunted Noir the Bar, one of the best Noir the Bars running. I love coming to DC and reading. It's because it's put on with such panache, but also working through your column at the Washington Independent Review of Books, and just your essays and your stance on defending crime writing as a authentic literary form and the good that it can do for people. And so, yeah, this is a pleasure for me to be here. And, I extend the same congratulations to you. I think The Unrepentant was probably one of my favorite books when it came out. It's just such an incredible achievement. And anybody that's been following your work knows that you're not only a really good novelist, but a really, really incredible author with an incredibly interesting Seabrook sense of humor that I find fascinating. So yeah, that it's going to be a mutual admiration society for a little while. But yeah, this is great to have a chance to talk. We haven't had a chance to catch up with everything going on with the pandemic and the almost nearly fall of democracy. We haven't had a chance to catch up. So
I mean, we were busy. I get it.
A lot going on.
We talked about readings, and before we start, I wanted to see if you could read a bit of Blacktop Wasteland. If you'll start off the discussion, I'll end it later with a little reading from They're Gone.
Yeah. All right. I would love to. I'll put on my spectacles and I will read from the UK cover, which is just as good and interesting as the American cover, but it's pretty cool to say you have a UK cover. In all my life, in all those years of working as a bouncer and a retail manager and a fast food cashier, I never thought I'd be able to say I have a UK version of anything, except maybe an arrest warrant. So it's really cool to have that. But I'm gonna read from the first.
I love that cover.
From the first chapter of Black. Thank you. I'm gonna read
from
the first chapter
again?
of Blacktop Wasteland. Oh yeah, I love this cover. It's the UK publisher headline came up with it. It's fascinating. So. But yeah, I'm going to read from the first chapter. And here we go. Shepherd's Corner, Virginia, 2012. Beauregard thought the night sky looked like a painting. Laughter filled the air only to be drowned out by a cacophony of revving engines as the moon slid from behind the clouds. The bass from the sound system of nearby Chevelle was hitting him in the chest so hard, it felt like someone was performing CPR on him. There were about a dozen other late model cars parked haphazardly in front of the old convenience store. In addition to Chevelle, there was a Maverick, 2 Impalas, a few Camaros, and 5 or 6 more examples of the heyday of American muscle. The air was cool and filled with the scent of gas and oil, the rich, acrid smell of exhaust fumes and burnt rubber. A choir of crickets and whippoorwills tried in vain to be heard. Beauregard closed his eyes and strained his ears. He could hear them, but just barely. They were screaming for love. He thought a lot of people spent a large part of their life doing the same thing. The wind caught the sign hanging above his head from the arm of a pole that extended 20 feet into the air. It creaked as the breeze moved it back and forth. Carter Speedy Mart, the sign proclaimed in big black letters set against a white background. The sign was beginning to yellow with age. The letters were worn and chipped, the cheap paint flaking away like dried skin. The second E had disappeared from the word speeding. Beauregard wondered what had happened to Carter. He wondered if he had disappeared too. Man, ain't none of y'all ready for the legendary Olds. Y'all might well go home to your ugly wives, because y'all ain't ready for this. For real, though. Y'all ain't got nothing for my legendary Olds. She does 60 a second, $500 line to line. Huh? Y'all mighty quiet. Come on now. The olds done send many a boy home with his pockets lighter. I done outrun more cops than the Duke boys and the olds. You ain't just beating me in the olds, homeboy. A guy named Warren Crocker crowed. He was strutting around his 76 Oldsmobile Cutlass. In truth, it was a beautiful car. A dark green body with chrome mag rims and chrome trim that ran across its surface like liquid lightning. Smoked out glass and LED lights that emitted an ethereal bluish glow like some bioluminescent sea creature. Beauregard leaned against his duster as Warren pontificated about the invincibility of the Oldsmobile. Beauregard let him talk. Talk didn't mean anything. Talk didn't drive the car. Talk was just noise. He had $1,000 in his pocket. It was all the profits from the last 2 weeks in the garage after most of the bills had been paid. He was still $800 short on the rent for the building that housed his business. It had come down to a choice between the rent or glasses for his youngest boy, which, after all, wasn't really a choice. So he had reached out to his cousin Kelvin and asked him to find out where the nearest street race was being held. Kelvin still knew some guys who knew some guys who knew some other guys who knew where the money races could be found. And that was how they found themselves just outside of Dinwiddie County, 10 miles from the fairgrounds, where legally sanctioned drag races were held. Beauregard closed his eyes again. He listened to Warren's car idle. Under the sound of all the boasting and braggadociousness, Beauregard heard an unmistakable ticking. Warren had a bad valve in his engine. That left two possibilities. He knew about it, but he thought it was an acceptable defect that could be overcome by the sheer power of his motor. Or maybe he didn't know about it, and he didn't care about one funky valve. Beauregard nodded at Kelvin. His cousin had been milling around the crowd trying to drum up a big money race. There had already been 4 contests, but no one was willing to put up more than $200. And that wasn't going to cut it. Beauregard needed at least $1,000 bet. He needed someone who would look at the duster and see it as an easy payday. Look at its stripped down exterior and assume it was a pushover. In short, he needed an asshole like Warren Crocker. That's just a little bit from the first chapter.
That is so good, man. Thank you so much. So when, I got to ask you, I sent Sean these questions ahead of time so we could have a discussion, but I'm going to fanboy out a little bit because I loved this book. I interviewed Sean for the Independent and I said, it's one of the best books of the year. It's one of the best books I've read in crime fiction. I still hold to that. When did you know? Because I have a feeling you knew you were onto something special with this. When was it?
I think I got the first inclination that it was going to be. Well, I'm like, I think we all are writers and we all go through this. We have a certain amount of self-deprecation, a certain amount of self-loathing. And I fluctuate between, wow, this is a really good idea to, this is crap. I don't know what I'm doing. What are words? And so I kind of go back and forth. But I wrote a scene in the book. And if you read the book, you know the scene. It's after, I was about a little over halfway through the book. And I thought I was doing okay. And there's a scene where Beauregard, his nickname is Bug, is talking to his wife. And he's found out that his oldest son, a 12-year-old named Javon, has done something bad, has done something illegal. And he talks to his wife about how he's not even that angry at his son because that tendency is a part of his makeup. It's like a genetic trait that passes from his father to him to his boys. And he has this line where he says, I'm not even mad, violence is a montage family tradition. And that was the moment where I thought maybe this is saying more than just, it's not, I think it was saying a little bit more than just a heist novel. It wasn't just a heist novel anymore. It was saying some things that I needed to say for my own well-being, my own peace of mind. And so writing the book, that became a catharsis at that point. And then the rest of the book kind of just fell into place. So that was the only time where I felt like, I think I might have something interesting here. And I had no idea that people would respond to it the way they have. None at all. And, you know, even when I started getting like pretty cool blurbs from writers that I admire, I still just didn't know if people were going to get it. You know, writing, and you can attest to this, Ed, writing is sometimes like telling yourself a joke for 9 months or a year and then hoping everybody else gets the punchline. So you don't know. And but that was the first time I felt like I kind of had something. And it you know, people have really connected with it. I want to ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got nominated for an Anthony for the Unwritten. And the thing that I loved about that book, and the same thing I love about They're Gone, is that you are really incredibly gifted at melding really dark, gritty, intense crime with really just belly aching humor, just incredible humor. And so when you're writing Unrepentant or when you're writing They're Gone, is that a concerted effort on your part to insert humor to kind of, you know, to sort of cleanse the palate, you know, for some of the horrific things that happen in other places in the book?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I find that humor is, you know, you got to be very judicious with it, because people who try to write funny stuff tend to write too much humor into a scene, and it destroys the scene, it destroys the gravity, and it cheapens a lot of really important moments. You know, I'm really fortunate to have worked with a good agent and a good editor who cut me back on that a little bit, because I've seen it happen too often where you have something and it just like you end up diluting the power of something. I've always thought a really good example of humor, and one that it's not really from a writer so much. I do like some comic writers, but I like P.G. Wodehouse, and there's a couple of others out there. But I thought the old Roseanne show had really good moments of humor, where you would have this really severe dramatic fight that was all of a sudden warmed by humor within the family, an inside joke that the audience knew, you know, it brings them in. But more than that, for me, I think, you know, thinking actually it's kind of like a thing with sitcoms. You know, like you think about Cheers had the bar, and the Cosby Show had the living room. Not so much the gynecologist's office downstairs anymore, but the living room, and these like these places that you as the audience went, where you needed where you felt a home, you felt a sense of safety and security, and that's where the show was filmed. Friends had their apartment, and so in books you don't get that as much. You don't really have that one place where people go, so that you find it either in the character, and sometimes you find it in the humor. I think that sense of identity, where you feel like you as a reader belong. Where did you, for you, you know, is there something in where do you find the comfort in your stories?
I think for me, I mean, I have a little bit of humor in my books. I'm funnier. I'm funnier in person than I am in my books, but I have a little bit of humor in my books. Jokes. I'm pretty good with one-liners. If you read Blacktop Wasteland, there's a character named Reggie who has a lot of funny one-liners and comments and colloquialisms. But for me, the place where I try to give my characters comfort, I always try to have like a house, like in Blacktop Wasteland, it's the garage. You know, that's where Bug feels safe. That's where he's trying to create his version of the American dream. I think it's more so the garage than it is his house. And that's where I think he does a lot of his, and if you read the book, he plans a lot of stuff there. He recovers there because it's a symbol of him trying to go straight. It's a symbol of him trying to be what he thinks he should be. And so that happens more so in the in comfortable settings. But like I said, I use humor. I actually use more humor in Razorblade Tears, which is, if anything, more violent than Blacktop Wasteland. But I try to give, you know, because, you know, I write grim, gritty, dark type stuff, but you can't have that sense. It can get unrelenting And if you don't have at least a little break, there has to be a little bit of a touch of sunlight breaking through the night, so to speak, or it's depressing. And I don't want any reader to ever be depressed. I want you to feel deeply, and I want you to feel completely, and I want you to identify my character. But at the same time, I don't want you to be, psychologically scarred, hopefully. And so humor, like I said, a good one-liner can cut that intensity a little bit. And I think that's very necessary. My favorite books that I love to read have pick a book like not Silence of the Land, but Red Dragon or Silence of the Lambs. There's little bits of humor. Lecter gets little jokes here and there. Especially like Silence of the Lambs, he's talking about one of his patients, and he gets murdered, and he's like, it was the best thing for him, really. His therapy was going nowhere. Little gallows humors like that helps to alleviate some of the stress of the overall grittiness of the book itself.
That's really interesting, because there's something I've been thinking about lately, and I started thinking about it after reading there's a couple of books coming to mind. One is our mutual friend Jennifer Hillier. Her second book, Creep, ended on a dark note. And no, not Creep, Freak. Freak I forget. Freak. Freak ended on a dark note. And then I read another writer recently, who I think we're both friends with as well, Hannah Mary McKinnon. And one of her books ended on an unsettling note. And I was like, I finished it, and I was like, well, you're going to end it that way? And it made me think, like, I don't like ending books like that, because I feel like for me, I need to tie it up in a way that makes me happy. But there's something about that when I read those, that I was like, there might be something here that's more powerful, because it's unsettling, and it's kind of like it's hitting me on the way out. I'm like walking away, limping. What do you think? I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers to your books, but.
Oh no, but I think for me, I like to have the sort of ambiguous emotional ending. And what I mean is, I try to tie things up. I try to bring things to a head, so to speak, but I like to leave the reader wondering about the personal relationships of whoever has survived the course of the book. I did it in Blacktop Wasteland. I do it in Razorblade Tears. There's a scene, and I'm not giving a spoiler away. There's a scene toward the end of Razorblade Tears where, a police officer asked one of the characters, "Was it worth it?" Because basically it's a story about revenge, and the character says, I wouldn't know, because they're trying to protect themselves, because they don't want the police to have any evidence about what they've done. He said, I don't know. But I mean, if you ask me, if I was the one who did it, I would say, and he says in a very menacing tone, I would say I could kill them all 1,000 times and it'd never be worth it. It would never be enough, but it'd always be worth it. With Blacktop Wasteland, there's an ending that's very ambiguous. There's I wrote that last line specifically for that. I wrote the last line because I wanted the reader to come away with the fact that all this violence and all this death and all this has occurred, and these characters that have survived made it through that, but they're never going to be the same. They're never going to. You don't leave that behind. And so for me, I do like that. I do think. I think it depends on the type of story you're telling. Like you mentioned Jennifer Hillier, what came to my mind is she's a great writer. Oh my God, Jar of Hearts. Anybody that's listening, if you haven't read Jar of Hearts, it's an incredible book. You should definitely read it. But the thing that came to mind for me was C.J. Tudor's The Chalk Man. And it ends on a very disturbing note, to the point it makes you reevaluate a lot of the characters in the book. One is in particular. And so I think if you're writing a thriller or suspense thriller, that is almost par for the course, as opposed to if you're writing a more hard-boiled crime noir thriller. But then again, I say that, and then you read Jim Thompson, and that's nobody's more unsettling than Jim Thompson. So I mean, I guess it all depends. But for me personally, I do like to go to that more concrete resolution.
You mentioned that CJ Tudor book, and I have it on my nightstand in my to be read pile because of a social media post you put up about it, about how you were blown away. And now I've got to move it to I'm moving it higher up that pile when we're done here. So you have some apologies to some other writers who are getting pushed down. I gotta check that out. We were on, so I think this was the panel. We did a panel together a couple of years ago, and a struggling young writer named Jeffrey Deaver was there. Really hope he makes something of himself. But
the guy has moxie.
He said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, and I've thought about it ever since, if you're going to write a thriller, and you and I both probably write, we'd be classified as thriller writers. You have to have a twist. You have to. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you think is that a rule among our genre?
I think you have to have a twist. I think there has to be, like, for instance, if you're writing a heist novel, you got to have the double cross. Mm-hmm. You gotta have the double cross. Even if it's a lighthearted heist novel like Ocean's 11 or whatever, you got to have the double cross. That's the thing. That's a founding trope, foundational tenet of the heist novel. If you have the revenge novel, you got to have the betrayal. Somebody that the characters trust and love or respect is in on it. And so they have to fall and be a part of the revenge. I think there are certain tropes. And I think in thrillers, if you're writing a suspense thriller, I think you got to have a twist. Is a book poorer for not having a twist? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, like, I'll go back to Thomas Harris. I'll use him again. There's not really a twist in Red Dragon or Silence of the Lambs. They're pretty straightforward. You have these horrible, horrible serial killers that do horrible things, and the FBI is trying to hunt them down. There's a surprise, but I don't know if it's so much a twist. A good twist, though, when done well and executed with sophistication, can take a so-so book into the stratosphere. Like, for instance, The Talented Mr. Ripley has a great twist. Or you want to talk about something more recent. I'll tell you one. I will go back to our mutual friend of ours. Jennifer Hillier's most recent book, Little Secrets, has a really good twist. Has a twist that changes the dynamic of the whole story. And so, I think I think it depends on the type of thriller that you're telling. If you're telling us, like, I'm about to begin, I'm outlining something right now that's going to be sort of a Southern Gothic murder mystery. Really my first straight up mystery since My Darkest Prayer. And so, I think you got to have a twist because it's expected. I think there's certain things. I think there's a value in subverting expectations, but you got to be really skilled to do it. I don't think I'm skilled enough. Sometimes you just got to go with expectations, because sometimes in subverting expectations, you like you said, dilute the whole intent of the story. And so for me, if you're writing a thriller and people come expecting a twist, I'm going to try to give you the best one I can. I'll leave it at that. I think it depends on on where you're at on the genre scale.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I was just talking with somebody about this because I was reading another writer's novel because she's going out on submission, and I was telling her, like, one thing this book could use is a couple of cliffhangers, throughout. You need some foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, it seems kind of like too on the nose. And I was like, yeah, maybe. It depends how you do it. But most books, even no matter what genre, use cliffhangers. I don't care if you're going to, like whatever the highest echelon of literature you consider. It may be done subtly, but something's drawing you forward.
Right.
These techniques, go ahead.
I was just saying, I just said this on social media the other day. John Irving, who is the most literary of literary writers that you could ever think of, he has an incredible twist in a book called Until I Find You. And it takes place about 3/4 through the book, and it's a headbanger. It's like, wow, I did not see that coming. And it's not a suspense novel. It's a domestic thriller. It's about a guy who grows up. His mother is a tattoo artist. He grows up to be a famous actor. And he and his mother are searching for his father. His father abandoned them. And there's a twist toward the end of that book that smacks me in the mouth. And it's like, wow. And again, just jump off what you said, that's a book that's not a genre book, whatever that means. It's a literary novel. But because you're so heavily invested in the character and his story and his struggle, this twist, like I said, just punches you in the gut. And he does it a lot. Irving does it a lot. Because if you read like The Hotel New Hampshire, there's two major characters that die halfway through the book. And it's like, you did not see that coming at all. Or The World According to Garp. There's a brutal death in The World According to Garp. And I think, I think twists mimic the chaotic nature of real life. And so if you're a writer worth your salt, you've got to put you got to put a cliffhanger. Life every day, real life has cliffhangers all the time. So I definitely agree with that.
One of the weird things for me when I'm writing, and I know like usually because I mean, you said you're outlining. I outline all my books, and I generally stick to the outline. I don't usually, it doesn't get discarded. It gets adapted. It gets changed, but I don't like you ever throw it out and go with something else. Usually the kind of layout of the book's planned, but there's usually a point near the end where I'm like, you know what would really screw things up would be if this person died or this happened or this person double crossed that. And it's such a bold move that I'm like, I don't know if I should do it because it disrupts me too much. But then that's when I know it's worth it. That's when I know if it's affecting me this, it's going to blow away the reader. Right.
Oh yeah. I agree. Like when I say outline, I actually write more of a really long synopsis. I don't really do outlines. I kind of just tell myself the story. And like you, I don't always follow that to the letter. I usually use it as a guide map, as opposed to it's not set in stone. But when I'm writing, if I get toward the end, if I feel like things have become too pedestrian, I'm like, I'll just kill this person off. Y'all really like him? I'll get rid of him or her. or I'll have somebody, it's funny. When I was writing Raised by Tears, there's a character that really was just a throwaway character, a side character. And in the rewrite, I said, wouldn't it be cool if this character was betrayed the main two protagonists? And then, you go back and you're looking like, oh, can I give this person a reason to do that? And then when I went back to the book, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a legitimate reason. Jealousy is definitely a legitimate reason. So I think, that's always makes things interesting and fun. And like you said, if it freaks me out, it'll freak the writer out, the readers out. But let me ask you a question. So I admire that you have really strong characters. You create really complex, interesting characters. And your last two books had really strong female protagonists. The Unrepentant obviously had a female protagonist with a male, I wouldn't say subordinate protagonist, but it was her story. Yeah. She's the unrepentant one. Yeah. And with They're Gone, you have two really strong but different culturally, ethnically different women. And I'd also know that, for folks that don't know, your first couple of books, you had an interesting male protagonist. Was that a decision you made to write from a female perspective, or was it just something that naturally happened based on the story you were trying to tell?
It came a lot from research. I started doing a lot of research into sex trafficking, and when I did that, it became really hard to. There are absolutely men out there who are fighting the good fight, and they deserve a lot of praise and accolades. But the perpetrators of sex trafficking are almost uniformly all men. And it became very hard for me to want to tell a story in that world where the Unrepentant was set with a male hero. So with it, that kind of just continued, with They're Gone and with the new book I wrote. I mean, I don't, I'll be honest, that's one reason. The other reason is I don't think, one of my big frustrations with crime fiction is that there aren't very many writers who write a good alpha male character. And I don't think I'm one of them. I'm not one of those guys. I can't do it. I tried a couple of times, and it's just something I shy away from. I think, the probably right now, the prototypical male, alpha male character is probably Lee Child's Jack Reacher, right? And he's been for maybe a decade or two. But I think Lee's a really good writer. I think Lee Child's prose it has this lovely, like, short sing-song kind of effect through it. It's really beautifully balanced. I actually find Reacher books pleasurable to read. And I think you do it. I think you have very strong alpha male characters who are telling a side of sort of that male experience that hasn't been touched on before, because there's a corrosiveness that you're detailing. And I didn't find that as much with Jack Reacher. I didn't find Jack Reacher as a man who was plagued by what he did. Your characters absolutely are. And so that's why that's why I chose my protagonist. Why do you choose yours?
I wanted to write about men. There is this, I won't call it an idea. There is actually toxic masculinity. It is actually a plague on society, and the hegemony that comes along with it. I wanted to talk about men who maybe don't realize that they're caught up in toxic masculinity, and I like to call it tragic masculinity. Men like Bug, who are alpha males, but they're more like alpha males by circumstance, not by design, and it's not by choice. They're forced into that role. And some people are like, well, no, everybody has a choice. No, not really. I think when you're suffering in the depths of poverty and you're fighting through systemic racism, you are forced sometimes to either create this persona or break and bow to those forces. And like you said, but creating that persona is corrosive. It corrupts you as a person. And so I wanted to talk about those people. I wanted to talk about those men specifically, and kind of document their disillusion. Because for me, Bug he's a hero, but he's an anti-hero. And he has a lot of flaws. He has a lot of hubris. He knows that he's the smartest guy in the room whenever in the room he enters. That being said, that overconfidence, that arrogance is his fatal flaw. If you want to talk about like classic Hellenic heroes, which I'm very much influenced by, like Greek and Roman mythology, that's his Achilles heel is his confidence. His greatest strength is his greatest weakness. And so I was drawn to talk about those things, but also talk about those things. I think men, a lot of times, we're just not encouraged to get in touch with our feelings. We're not encouraged to show weakness. We're not encouraged to examine ourselves. And I really wanted to do that. I wanted to examine a character like Bug. The guys that I write about in Razorblade Tears, Randolph and Buddy Lee Jenkins, are two fathers that have nothing in common. Ike is a black ex-con who owns his own landscaping business, who's very tightly wound. He's bottling up all his rage and anger. He did 7 years in prison for manslaughter, and he was guilty. He admits that he was guilty. And so he's trying to walk that straight and narrow. And Buddy Lee is somebody who, despite realizing that, he has a little bit of privilege because of the lack or amount of melanin in his skin, hasn't been able to get on his feet the way he feel like he deserves. And so these two very strong, alpha males have sons. And these sons are gay, and these gay sons get married, and neither one of these guys are able to let go of that alpha male persona long enough to embrace their sons. And unfortunately, their sons die. And so what does that do to you as a man? What does that do to you as a man mired in preconceived notions of masculinity? And how, unfortunately, I've seen it take a death to make somebody examine themselves. That's why I choose the protagonist that I choose. And I think one of my weaknesses is that I haven't been able to really tap into I don't think I write weak female characters, but it's very much, the stories are masculine centric. They're male centric. It's Bug's story. It's Ike and Buddy Lee's story. And so one of the things that I want to work on, and one of the things I'm challenging myself on, is to write a more complex and morally interesting female character. That being said, I do think Bug's wife in Blacktop Wasteland is a pretty strong character, because she's the only person that won't allow him. She's not afraid of him. She's the only person in the book that's not scared of him. And she's the only person in the book that calls him on his BS. There's a scene in the book where he's complaining about their money troubles. And she's like, well, sell your duster. He's like, I can't sell the duster. Come on, my dad. My dad's it's the only thing I got. She's like, your dad was a good person. We're literally weeks away from losing our business. Sell the car. And she's the only person that does that. She's the only person that stands up to him toward the end. And even though he tries to fix everything, she still won't allow him. She won't let him off the hook. And so I'm proud of that. I think I can do better, but I'm proud of that character. So
yeah, no, you should be. I didn't think, I've talked about and written about, sort of these, kind of alpha male writers who write these characters and disregard the woman. Blacktop Wasteland to me was kind of a subversion to that. I liked her character. I thought she was
Thank
strong. So we've been talking about, actually I want to ask one question about Blacktop Wasteland without spoiling anything. When did you revise the ending? Was that the original ending, or did it change?
Yes. So let me tell you a story real quick. Two of our mutual friends, one I think you met, I know you've met in person, one you may not. I have two really good friends who are writers, Nikki Dolson and Kelly Garrett. And both of them are fantastic writers. And I sent both of them the original ending of Blacktop Wasteland. And I got the same, independent of each other, I got the same response. And it was, to not spoil anything, she said, if you end it like that, I will hate that character Bug forever. Because and I said again, independent of each other, they both said, you punked out. You letting him off easy. And they were right. And I did that because me as a writer, I had grown so fond of him, I wasn't ready to have the hard emotional conversation that he has to have to end the book. And so that wasn't the original ending at all. The original ending was even bleaker than that. And so that ending, I went through about 5 endings till you get the one that's in the book, which I think is a lesson for myself and for anybody who's listening that wants to be a writer. You're never done, really. Even now, the book's out and it's won you won the LA Book Award or whatever. I still feel like there's stuff I could have done better. I feel like there are things I could have fixed. Luckily, there's not a lot of plot holes, but there are things I took out that maybe, if I ever hit the Stephen King status, there will be a unredacted version of Blacktop Wasteland.
That's the thing, right? It's I was just writing about this morning. That's the really hard thing is that so my new book's off to my agent. I'm waiting for her to read it. So whenever I see her on social media, I'm like, why aren't you reading my book? Why are you on Twitter? But I'm like, I'm thinking about that book and I'm like, that is absolutely the best thing I've written. That feels truest to me. And then it feels like a sense of like dismissiveness toward what you wrote in the past. And it's weird because you are a better writer, right? You should be. I mean, I'm assuming if you don't write every day, then we probably write close to every day. And it would suck to not get better after like 365 days of work and you're, and you haven't improved.
Oh yeah.
So
it's
kind of expected, but it is nice. I will say it is nice because every once in a while, I don't tend to reread my books, but every once in a while you have to, for whatever reason, you're giving a reading or what have you, and to discover that you don't hate it, to discover like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. I like this.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Now, I don't know. I think we're about the same age, but I remember I've been writing so long. I remember when I used to have my trunk. I had a box. I actually used to write on a typewriter and had stories and stuff like that. And I still have some of my mom, God rest her soul. My mom, she saved a bunch of them. And there's stories. Do you ever go back and read like your first forays into writing? Because I went back and read some of mine recently. They were awful. God. I'm surprised the people I sent those stories to back in the day. Because when I first started writing, I was like, I'm 17. I'm going to be Stephen King. He did it. He got published at 20. I can do it. And it's like, oh my God, this is so bad. And so to jump on what you said, I do feel like I got better. Like even in the bad stuff, there are glimpses of the writer I could become. There are little signs here and there that maybe I'm not awful. The story as a whole might be bad, but there are some things in there that I feel like, okay, I can see that with training and with work and with heart and a lot of effort, those things blossomed into what is quote unquote, whatever my style, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. But I think, and I want to ask your opinion on this, and I say this as a controversial opinion, but I don't think it's controversial. I think there are people who are just born storytellers. Like I can teach you, verb subject agreement. I can teach you syntax. I can teach you how to diagram a sentence. I can teach you how to not end sentences with prepositions. I can teach you all of the technical aspects of writing, but I do think there are people who just have it, and there are some people who don't. And I don't know if you can change that. I think you can get better, but that innate, nameless quality that is a storyteller, I don't know. I wonder about that. What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I mean, you're right, because so I was cleaning out a bunch of stuff and I found stuff from 5th grade and I won the storytelling contest. And then there was something in 7th grade where, that was always just my go-to. Right. It was just like when I failed out of college, I was a psychology major and they said, you can come back in, but you cannot be a psychology major. You absolutely are out of that department. You got to pick something new. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I'll go to English because it's easy, and it was until I got into it, until I started getting the advanced writing courses. And I was fortunate to go to a really good school for writing. So, I discovered how difficult it was, but it was just kind of what I was drawn to, and I've wondered that though, there's some, I'm really drawn to music. I love music. I am not a born musician by any stretch. I don't want to play it. I don't. So, with Sarah, who introduced us, with Sarah Jones, there seems to be a natural quality there. Not every singer has, but to your point, sometimes I'm afraid that's the case. That you do have this sense that you want to, that this is something you're sort of you're drawn to.
I like that analogy about music because I think it's the difference between listening to, say, someone play, all 12 notes or all 6 chords or whatever on a guitar competently, and then listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix. I think I'll never encourage someone to not go to school or not go to college and not learn the rules. Because I think you need to learn the rules in order to know when to break them. I think that's the same thing with music. You learn scale, you learn chords, you learn notes, and then you pull a Jeff Beck or a Tom Morello, and you break the rules. But then again, like I said, there are some people that just have a different tone, different quality to their writing. It's funny you were talking about college. I had to drop out in my sophomore to junior year. My mom she was already ill when I was born, and she got ill. She had a real bad illness, and so I had to drop out and had to come home. And I remember one of my English professors. I was an English major, and I was doing an advanced creative writing course. And one of my professors, I was leaving school, cleaning out my locker, not locker, but cleaning out my room and all that. And I remember a professor came up to me. He says, I'm sorry that you're leaving. I said, yeah, me too. It was a family issue. He says, well, don't stop writing. He said, you have a lot of talent for this. And I'm like, yeah, all right, whatever. And he's like, no, seriously, I don't care where you go, what you do, don't stop writing. You don't even have to get published. Just keep writing. And I kind of brushed it off at the time, but he was so right. He and my 11th grade English teacher were the two people who really convinced me, like, I might be able to do this. And I think if you're a writer, whether you have an MFA or whether you're a college dropout like myself, or whether you're someone who, it has another profession, but you have an interest in writing, I think the secret to it is just keep writing. You have to. It's like working out. It's like lifting weights. So I think you have to do it. And I think that's the secret. If anybody ever wants a secret, there's no secret to success, but the secret to being a good writer is to constantly do it.
Yeah. I mean, I there was, I remember I didn't get an MFA, but I took after I graduated with my bachelor's, I took a couple of MFA level graduate writing workshops to see if that was something I wanted to do. Ultimately, I never did. And there were beautiful writers in those programs. And I know I ran into one the other day, and this guy I've always thought about because he wrote a short story that to me was, at the time, was groundbreaking. And he's not writing now. And, he was like I said, he had that born storyteller, but he didn't, for whatever reason, I don't know him personally. He just never continued with it. And I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, fire's got, you got to forge it. You got to
stick with it. I think there is, I'll say one more thing, and then I want you to read a section from your book, but I'll say one more thing about that. I think there's a fine line between being a perfectionist and being an artist. And I think sometimes a person who's a perfectionist can't be an artist because they're so focused on achieving that perfection that anything less than perfect is anathema to them. And so they don't pursue publishing. They don't pursue trying to get published. And so I think, the people that do get published fall under that artist category. It was like, I know it's not perfect, but damn it, I did the best I could. I did it. If you ask me about Blacktop Wasteland or Razorblade Tears or any of the stuff I've written, it ain't perfect and it ain't for everybody, but I did the best I could with what I got, with using the tools that I have. So, but yeah, I'd love to hear some from They're Gone.
I would too, but
if we got time.
let's throw off the program, man, because this is really interesting. And you know what? People can read my book, go buy it and read it and check it out. But I want to continue this conversation because I'm really fascinated by this. And we have like 5 more minutes. Because one thing I've been thinking about, and you and I, we're about the same age, probably. We're and probably started writing. You mentioned that you started writing series probably, like at 17, you really got the bug. For me, it was a little later. Like I know for me, it was 97 because it was the year I graduated. And that's when I started writing every day. And it's so hard, right? There's no, it's one thing with writing is that you, and any art, right? There's no guarantee. No one owes you anything. You can work, you can, you're in school. If you study, you'll probably do better. If your teacher sees that you're trying, you'll probably get a good grade. With writing, you can be the best student there is, and you may not get, if you want traditionally published, if you that may not, it just may not happen. There's no reason it could. And how did you, there's that line between persistence and pathetic.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell where you are. You're wondering
I was real close.
Yeah.
I was real close to pathetic before things broke loose. I'll do this real quick because I know we're running low on time. So like you said, I started writing seriously around 17, 18. I wrote through my 2 years in college. When I dropped out of college, I continued writing. I've been writing so long. I remember you had to send self-addressed stamp envelopes if you want to get your writing back.
Yeah.
And so
SASEs.
I had a lot of ups and downs. Yeah, SASE. And so I had a lot of, but I always got good rejection letters and so on and so forth. And I had a lot of ups and downs. I went to a lot of different jobs and working and all this kind of stuff. And for me, around 2009, I was like, man, what I'm doing isn't working as far as writing. I've got to do something better. So I actually went back to school. Well, I took a class at a community college for one semester. And the thing I got from that was not so much the technical aspect of writing, but it was like, if you want to get published, the publishing industry has changed. You really have to get to know the people in the publishing industry. And I started going to conventions. Sadly with the pandemic, we lost that for a year, but that's what happened. I started going to where the publishers are, where the agents are. Because here's the thing, if you got a room with 50 people, about 25 of those people can have talent to write. Of those 25, maybe 15 will actually write something to completion. Of those 15, maybe 10 will send it out. Of those 10, maybe 5 will take constructive criticism. And of those 5, maybe 3 will take constructive criticism and keep writing. And you just got to be one of those 3. Plus, you got to get your name out there. You got to go to places where people that are in the publishing industry can't gather and congregate. So that might mean selling your story to a magazine that doesn't pay you any money. It might be going and being a part of a charity anthology. But the more you get your name out there, the more opportunities you have. And it's a lot of luck. It's way more luck than people, I think, understand. It really is. My career, I owe it in part to being in St. Petersburg at BioCon on a panel that went completely crazy sideways, and being able to handle that and drawing the attention of an agent in the audience who liked the way that we handled that panel going off the rails. If it hadn't been for that, I don't know if I've been published. I might have been published because I had already had a book out with an independent press. I don't know if I'd have went to the next level, and who knows, and who can know, It's a lot of luck, but you got to put yourself out there. You can't win if you're not in the game.
It's also, I always find, a lot of self-awareness. You really have to know, like there's one thing with writing, but it's also writing smart too, so you, because when I started writing seriously, I did not seek any advice from anyone. I didn't take class. I didn't go to any conferences or nothing. I just thought I wrote for about 5 years every night. And I thought this was going to be, when I emerged from a cage, I always say it would be like Moses emerging with commandments, and people would just flock around, and no one flocked and no one cared. And the book had, like you said, it had those moments, right? The book itself wasn't terrible. But it didn't have any insight into publishing. In any insight, it was written for myself. And that's the kind of thing I would have learned at conferences. I would have learned that from writing groups. I would have learned from organizations. And, the thing with crime fiction, we mentioned this at the beginning, is that it is one of the friendliest, most supportive communities out there. I mean, we need success, right? I mean, we need a Blacktop Wasteland, because you selling through the roof, you getting these movie deals helps all of crime fiction along. It's wonderful because it's nice to be in an industry like this where so much of your blood and sweat and tears goes into it. And I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but there's no envy. It's really cool. I love it.
No, I love seeing the people that, and I know we're running late, but I just want to say this real quick. The people that I've quote unquote come up with, being a writer, being a crime writer, sometimes it's very close to being a comedian. If you watch, there's a certain class, so to speak, that you come up with. There's a certain group of people that all start coming out at the same time, and nothing makes me happier than seeing one of those people that I came up with, one of those folks that I went to Noir, the bar, that we had to put our money together to get enough gas to go to DC, have a success, or see someone that I met at a convention who was really rattled with self-doubt, get a movie deal or get a big publishing contract. Those things mean the world to me. I love cheering. There's a great picture of Keegan Michael Key from Key and Peele when Jordan Peele won his Oscar. And there's a picture of him jumping in the air. And I want that to be me for everybody that I know in writing. all my friends. I want that to be me for you. I want to be that way for Kelly or Nikki Dolson or Jennifer Hillier or Eric Pruitt or any of those folks that I came up with, because when one, it's rising tide lifts all boats. That's the way I feel about publishing, especially in crime fiction. Because I started out writing fantasy and sci-fi, and it's not nearly as friendly. So I'll just be diplomatic and say that not even close. Crime writing is just so much more friendly, so much more fun. And I'm very honored to be a part of that community and honored to know people like you, because we tease each other a lot and we pick at each other a lot, but honestly, having you as a colleague and as a friend, it means the world to me, and it really just exemplifies the relationships that exist within crime fiction.
We're going to go back to dissing each other on social media, though, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, I just want to make sure we're on the same. I thank you so much, Sean, and I want to say thanks to Gaithersburg for having us here to talk about crime fiction and mysteries in our books. This was terrific.
Yes, thank you so much to the Gaithersburg Festival, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. This was fantastic.
Well, that was an amazing panel. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sean and Ed, so much for coming and being here with us today. You both are really busy people. Life is going on. Everything's going on. So we really, really appreciate you coming and spending this time with us today. And as a non-author, it's a real pleasure to get to actually see authors in person. You're not in my living room playing piano. We could play some things. If you come next time, you're totally invited. But we're here together, and we get to see you as people. We get to see you as creators and artists, because, just like any other discipline in the arts, you have to just keep doing it. It doesn't happen on the first day. It takes years and years. And sometimes you're probably like, man, this is a slog. But then when you create something that's beautiful, that you're proud of, holy cow, it is worth it like 1,000 times over. So it's been a real pleasure to have you here today, and to share your time and talent with us. The Gaithersburg Book Festival is super, super grateful to have you both. And I'll just remind everybody, I have my copies here. So the best way to support people in the arts and to support the arts is to go and buy the book. You've heard this discussion. If you don't have it, go ahead online and go to Politics and Prose, go to the store and pick it up, because I promise you, I read both of these in like basically 2 days. I lost a lot of sleep, not in a bad way, but just because, when you stop reading a book, it feels like a long commercial and you're like, you know what, I just got to keep going. So you take a quick bathroom break, you come back, and suddenly you're like, it's 4 a.m. Okay. But anyway, definitely please support the authors. It's been really a great pleasure. And thank you so, so much for being with us today, because the characters that you write are just so interesting. And for folks that haven't had a chance to read both of these books, they're really, the characters are so different. And a lot of times, which is an interesting thing about reading all these authors, is that you have these characters that are often completely different from your own life, totally different. And it's really, both Ed and Sean do an amazing job of really digging in and letting you meet these people, and being like, not in their skin, but you're like literally standing next to them, and you can smell the blood, or you can feel the heat off of the blacktop, in the summer, like after rain and the mist comes up. These authors are so great at giving you that picture that you're actually there and you're really thinking, what is this person going to do? I have no idea. They're not like me at all. So now I'm going to get to learn what this person decides to do. And they all make these decisions based on their lives. And it's a treat for those of us that don't write to read these stories. And so thank you again so much. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this presentation. We have an amazing lineup of programs for both adults and children throughout the month of May. You don't want to miss it. Please go to GaithersburgBookFestival.org and look over the schedule so you can plan your festival month. Before you go, we have a special message for you from the amazing author and bookstore owner, Ann Patchett, and her dog, Sparky. Enjoy, everyone.
I'm Ann Patchett here at Parnassus Books, with my dog Sparky, and I want to tell you the importance of supporting your local independent bookstore, Politics and Prose. They are a remarkable partner with this book festival. Now, when a book festival is live, it's really easy. You just go to the table and you buy your book and then you go to the event. But when a book festival is virtual, it gets a little trickier because you're home and you might think, well, you know, I'll just buy the book on Amazon. So I'm here to tell you, don't buy the book on Amazon. For one thing, Jeff Bezos has enough money, right? He's trying to colonize the moon or something. He doesn't need anything that you've got. Politics and Prose, on the other hand, they're your local independent bookstore, and you love them, and they bring you so many events. They work harder than any bookstore I know in their community. And if you want them to be there alive and healthy and well when all this is over, you actually need to support them. They are the people that are putting a tax base in your community, okay? So you have teachers and police officers and firefighters, and when you pay a couple dollars more for a book, you're creating jobs in your community. So enjoy your book festival, support Politics and Prose. Remember, Ann Patchett and Sparky think it's the thing to do. Shop local. Thank you.